Before Prabhupada came, New Vrindavan in '74, it was really, there was no support from anywhere. We were just eating weeds to live, literally. We were eating weeds. And so there wasn't much money, but there was this, some construction projects going on, and there were, so every little penny that came in, it was always, gee, and we didn't eat rice. White rice was a Sunday feast item, to give you perspective. So the question is, okay, the guru's coming, you want to do the right thing for the guru. Well, which is more important, to use the money to push on the project, or since the only vehicles we had were all pretty junky, like trucks and old wrecky things. Nobody had a nice vehicle. Or should they rent a nice vehicle for Prabhupada to ride in? So it was like this whole back and forth went on for a couple weeks, and finally rent a nice vehicle for Prabhupada party sort of won out. So when Prabhupada came out from the airport, and my thing at that time was kind of like, going ahead, checking hallways and stuff. And so I got out to the car and opened the door, and he got in the car. And they went around. It was, the better car that you could rent at an airport. It wasn't like the Lumina or whatever, the equivalent in that time. It was the better car. And Prabhupada gets in, they go to start the car, and it won't start. It wouldn't start. I mean, this is, a rental car at an airport. Has this ever happened to anybody? I mean, and they'd driven the car, they'd picked the car up, they'd driven it over to the curb, so when he came out of the airport and got in it, it wouldn't start. It was completely dead, nothing. So then it turned out somebody's devotee's brother was there, and he had it wasn't a farm vehicle. So Prabhupada they got him out. They messed with it for like 10, 15 minutes, and nobody could get nothing. So they got him out, and he got in this other car and drove that down to the farm. They drove him down to the farm there. So it was sort of like, I always thought it was sort of funny that Krishna just sort of intervened. So you got kind of like, you made the gesture for the guru, performed the sacrifice for the guru, but you still got to keep the money. And that was pretty, to me it was kind of, there's always a logical explanation for anything. It was kind of a little bit of a little miracle, But also when he was sitting in that chair, now on the knob up above there, we'd actually tried to grow some wheat there. Now I'm from wheat country. I mean, my family, we used to plant 1,000 acres of wheat every year. So wheat, I kind of grew up with wheat. It was just part of my life. And it was, when you go and expand your horizons, you're like, I meet people who didn't know anything about wheat. The only time they ever see it was like in a bread wrapper or something. And, it was one of those kind of culture shocks for me as I was growing up. But, so you get used to it. That's why people don't know anything about anything, they don't know anything about wheat. So Prabhupada was sitting there, and he looked up at the field, and it must have been like July or something, because the wheat was just about ready to combine. And he looked up there, and he goes, what did he exactly say? Something about, the wheat needs water, the wheat needs rain. And now I've just been listening all this time, and the big shots were talking to Prabhupada. I said, but now he's talking wheat. Now, this is where I live. I can talk now. And I go, and of course, the only time, it's practically the only conversation I ever had with Prabhupada, I started disagreeing with him. No, Prabhupada, it doesn't need any rain now. It's ready to harvest, and you don't want rain during harvest. Then all of a sudden I realized where he was coming from is that he, in his way he was saying is that the crop wasn't a good crop. The crop was weak. And so not only, and immediately I just went, my respect for him went way up, because not only did he recognize that it was wheat, which is, sounds funny if you're from the country, but it's just the way it is, that people wouldn't know a wheat plant if they saw it. And not only did he recognize that it was wheat, but he knew it was a poor crop. And now that starts to take a bit of an eye, you know, it wasn't, you know, he actually had some insight to it. And I realized that's what he meant, and I said, yeah, we'd had a kind of an off year that year, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, so that was kind of neat. And so there was still some land that we hadn't bought up at that point. It was all like local people living there. And one of the kids, the local kids, had a motorcycle. And he was running up the road. Let's let that tractor go by, I guess. Okay. And this kid he'd come running up the road, and he was actually pulling right into the driveway where Prabhupada was talking. But he couldn't see. He couldn't see up in there that there was a lot of people in the yard. Then he'd turn it around and he'd rev it up a bunch of times and just roar down the road back to his house. It was just, you know, he was a kid just running up and down a quarter mile on the Ridge Road there. So finally Kaladri, it was, you know, it was a little, because the kid would, you know, like a kid on a motorcycle, make a lot of noise, peel out, head down the road. And he was just going back and forth. Kaladri says, and every time he'd come, you'd have to kind of stop and listen because it was so loud until the kid would leave. And finally Kaladri says, maybe I should ask him to stop. Prabhupada said, oh, don't. If you ask him to stop, he'll just do it more. Which was a pretty insightful way teenagers think. Je anilo